Yep. Okay.
I was just going to say, Mr. Chairman, we would do the same thing, but it would be very unfortunate because these are polling places that are not being used
Right.
at all. And so that would be very unfortunate for us. And can I just add to Dean's comment
Sure,
about
sure.
on the mailing side? You know, we did make infrastructure investments over the last 10 years in vote by mail technology for handling the mailing process of that. And I think maybe partly what you're alluding to, Dean, is that we made those investments and used some of our HAVA funding to do that. So we're prepared today to go all vote by mail in Orange County if we had to.
Right.
And I know that obviously LA County is in a different position. So the other thing too, I've seen language communities in Orange County that have adopted vote by mail in very large numbers, significant numbers. So it is certainly a diverse county. Orange County is. We have 8 languages other than English that we support as well. But I think we need to start moving towards a model that will appeal to voters and the choices they're making on a daily basis, which is they want convenience.
Yep. I agree. Okay. Other questions from the senators? Well, thank you so much for your panel. I really do appreciate your insights, and we're trying to figure out how to get our heads around this just as you're doing the same. So thank you for all you're doing to help keep the system working. Thank you. Our final panel is from some of our advocacy organizations and research folks. We've got Kim Alexander, who's the president and founder of the California Voter Foundation, Pamela Smith from Verified Voting, and then Caitlin Maple, who's a research analyst with California Forward. And we look forward to hearing from you 3 ladies. So we'll start with Kim Alexander from the California Voter Foundation. There you go.
Good afternoon. So who pays for California elections? While much is known about the contributors and costs of political campaigns, very little is known or well understood about how the election process itself is funded. As we have heard today, the cost of administering elections in California, the costs such as printing ballots, hiring, training, and paying poll workers, printing and mailing ballots and ballot pamphlets, tabulating votes, verifying results, all these costs are covered primarily by local government. County governments facilitate elections at federal, state, and most local contests, and cities in California either administer their own elections or reimburse counties for the cost of administering them. Unlike cities, other levels of government do not reimburse counties for the cost of facilitating their elections. Although the federal and state offices take up a considerable amount of real estate on the ballot, neither the federal nor the state government contribute any funds directly toward the cost of elections. As we've heard today, the state and federal governments did make a significant investment in new voting equipment in 2002, and today we are here considering potential new state investments. So, in that spirit, here are 10 things California should do to modernize our elections and increase voter turnout.
No apologies to David Letterman.
No, I love top 10 lists.
All right.
And I miss David Letterman. Number 1, don't repeat what we did the last time. In 2002, the state and federal government appropriated nearly $400 million to purchase voting equipment, and counties had to put up matching funds as well. A lot of that equipment ended up being taken out of service due to certification and security problems.
Yeah.
At the time this procurement took place, there was little to no infrastructure at the state or federal level to test and certify equipment. Equipment was purchased before new standards were put into place. Following widespread technological problems in the March 2004 presidential primary, when voters in half of San Diego County's polling places were literally told to go home and come back later to try to vote, the legislature enacted a voter-verified paper audit trail requirement, resulting in 40,000 touchscreens replaced with optical scan systems or retrofitted with printers by the following 2006 primary election. We should also avoid having 58 counties operating as independent customers to a handful of vendors, negotiating 58 unique contracts for goods and services. Number 2, build the Secretary of State's infrastructure to support modernized elections. And this really builds on what Dean Logan said. We need to provide funding for staff to support the development of regulations and testing of voting-related equipment. Make sure technical support staff are well compensated so we don't lose them to the private sector. And I should note there are several very valuable staff people with the Secretary of State's office here today who've been doing double duty to get regulations, voting equipment, and VoteCal up and running. So we need to increase their ranks at the Secretary of State's office. Number 3, we should include all technology in the concept of voting systems, not just the machines used to cast or tabulate ballots or e-poll books and ballot-on-demand printers, but also the election management system, online assistance and services, such as Jill Levine was describing, mail ballot sorting machines, and especially technology used to verify signatures on mail ballot envelopes. This software is being deployed all around the state without any testing or certification, and it is literally disenfranchising people based on the designs and tolerance levels set by the vendor in the county, and that's unacceptable. Number 4, we need to fund the Secretary of State to provide technical support to counties. This is something Colorado is doing as well, and we should follow their model in this regard. We shouldn't leave the 58 counties on their own to deal with technology challenges. The Secretary of State can and should operate as a clearinghouse of information about all voting-related equipment in the state and provide on-site support and consultation, especially in counties where technical support is lagging. Number 5, this is maybe the most important one here. Number 5, provide ongoing direct support for elections such as block grants to counties with fiscal incentives to increase participation, or a funding scheme where counties could bill the state government for its portion of ballot space taken up by state contests, as they currently do with cities. A state funding approach could be modeled after the successful K-12 local control funding formula, taking into account not only the number of eligible and participating voters, but also language and accessibility needs. Build in requirements for reporting by counties to the state on topics such as rejected mail ballot rates, website usage, and election verification results. Number 6, we should also have the state providing money to the counties for signature verification for state ballot initiatives, which is a huge burden on county election offices, and also for special election costs. Number 7, consider the advantages to voters in creating more uniformity in our voting systems. For example, consider sending everyone a ballot, everyone in the state a ballot, such as the Hertzberg bill had contemplated, and have the state cover the costs and then allow counties to vary in the options by which it can be returned. One thing that concerns the California Voter Foundation greatly is the confusion that may ensue if we have 58 counties with 58 different approaches to the voting process. And one of the things I really love about the Colorado model is that there's uniformity in that every voter knows they're sent a ballot no matter whether they requested one or not.
No, we have 58 systems now.
Yes. Yes, we want more uniformity than we have now. Number 8. The state could pay for ballot postage. The legislature created the laws, as was noted earlier, that allow permanent no-excuse absentee voting. As this has become a more popular voting method, the state and county should factor in postage costs to ensure having a postage stamp on hand or knowing the exact amount of postage to require are not barriers to casting a ballot. As Jill Levine noted, we may have 3 cards for Sacramento, and there's no consistency among the post offices as to how much postage needs to be affixed to those envelopes. So that guessing game needs to be taken out of the voting by mail process. Number 9, we need to support information for voters online. We need to shift from a paper to digital framework and ensure that when voters use their smartphones to access official voting information, they can find it. The state is already working collaboratively with counties to implement sample ballot lookup tools statewide. This work should continue and should be expressly supported in a state election funding plan. And number 10, consider putting a measure on the ballot. Ask voters to approve an advisory vote to establish an ongoing state fund to directly support election administration. Such a proposal might enjoy bipartisan support in the legislature, as legislative Republicans have in the past 2 budget cycles pushed to restore funding to pay for state-mandated election programs. At this time of historic record low voter turnout, our political leaders and California's elections community need to work together to ensure adequate resources are provided to counties to facilitate meaningful democratic participation. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right, we'll next hear from Pamela Smith, who's the president of Verified Voting.
Thank you so much for having us here today. Verified Voting is a national organization, so I'll talk a little bit about how this looks in the national context as I present today and make some recommendations. One of the things that we do is we track what kinds, makes, and models of voting systems are being used in every voting jurisdiction in the country. There's an interactive map at our website if you're curious. California counties obviously are using one of several main types of voting systems, whether it's DRE, direct recording electronic systems, whether it's ballots and scanners in polling place with accessible ballot marking, ballots in polling places that are counted and scanned centrally, or some vote by mail with some solutions for accessible voting. The variety of vendors and models you already saw on the handout that you had provided today. Some states do all one type and make or model of voting system. So all the ballots and scanners in polling places with accessible marking, for example. Maryland is one state that does that, New Mexico, and there are others. Or in some states, they do all vote by mail with various solutions for accessible voting, such as Oregon or Washington or Colorado. What that does when you have that level of uniformity is to improve the ability of jurisdictions to get lower cost systems. And it also helps get lower cost consumables that are provided by the vendor. But it may also be the case that, may not be the case that one size fits all counties. Some jurisdictions use one type of voting system, such as ballots and scanners, but several vendors are approved. So there may be 2 or 3 overall makes and models available. One example of that is Michigan, where several counties use one kind and they use another kind, and then several other counties use a third kind. With the aging of the voting systems to the point where it is being described as a crisis, we saw the copy of the Brennan Center report mentioned by Secretary Padilla in the packet. Verified Voting shared current and historical voting system data with them, and when they conducted their research and interviewed jurisdictions around the country, what they reported was that election officials who need new equipment don't have enough funding. So this is not only in California that this is occurring. Election jurisdictions in at least 31 states told the Brennan Center they wanted to buy new voting machines within the next several years, some sooner rather than later. And from 22 of those 31 states, they said, we don't know where we'll get the money to pay for it. An overall national possible estimate to replace voting systems that need to be replaced is as much as $1 billion. But the Brennan Center notes, and I would agree, that this could be reduced with good contracting and volume purchasing within the states, as well as some new non-proprietary designs for voting systems, such as what you heard about from Los Angeles County from Dean Logan. One significant risk is that there's disparity within states where a wealthier county may be able to replace an aging voting system, whereas a county with fewer resources might not be able to do so quite as readily. And then you have a disparity in how voters are treated. And obviously, equipment in use bought with Help America Vote Act funds, in some cases was bought even before that law was passed, and they were reimbursed retroactively, so as long ago as 2000 or earlier. There's so many economic challenges that the states and counties have had over the past decade, and typically funding some other crumbling infrastructure gets priority year on year.
Right.
And we end up asking ourselves, is it the case that a voting system catastrophe is the only effective driver for change? And we hope that's not the case. So what are some of the things that drive equipment costs, and what does that include? Aside from the hardware, the firmware, the software, the licensing fees, and consumables like memory cards and the like, typically, it's a scanner for a polling place, an accessible ballot marking system for a polling place. It might be ballot on demand, a scanner for central count. Other polling place things like booths where voters mark their ballots, other county office things like storage racks and transport devices, and you heard about mail sorters and the like from the other speakers. What do these things cost? Well, the typical answer is it depends. The main thing that this depends on is not just pricing from a vendor, but volume pricing from a vendor. The bigger the jurisdiction, the better rate you get. So you might have scanners costing between $5,000 and $10,000 for a polling place style, and upwards of $40,000, even as upwards of $100,000 for a high-speed central count scanner. All of those things depend on what size your county is and how much bargaining power you have. Some of the costs are driven by changes in law. In the case of positive changes, such as Illinois mandated an extension of the deadline for registering to vote up to and including Election Day registration. For jurisdictions that were over a certain size, those 20 counties over a certain size had to be able to fulfill on that requirement, and it meant getting things like e-poll books for early voting and Election Day. and using a system that can provide all their ballot styles on demand. What kinds of things are changing around the country, and what do we expect to see as far as changes? Well, at one time, the calculus was all about, I need X devices per X voters in X polling places, and so much for printing ballots in advance. Now jurisdictions need and demand more flexibility. While still being able to accommodate polling place and/or vote center voters on Election Day, more need for early voting, better central scanners if you're increasing your vote by mail. It used to be that you could count your few ballots on a small scanner. Now, if most of your voters are voting by mail, you need the high-speed, big, fast ones.
Right.
How do jurisdictions manage the costs? Well, there's a variety of ways, and some of them are good. Some of them have unintended consequences. There are jurisdictions doing lease or lease to own. They're doing financing. Sometimes the state is helping them finance. Sometimes the state and county are sharing costs. Or states are getting bulk buying discounts by going with one particular vendor or a small number of vendors. What we've seen, and I think this is a really key takeaway, is that better contracts save money. Where states can really help counties, or several counties can band together, cost savings can be realized. What makes a good RFP or a good contract? The Election Assistance Commission is starting to post these online. Hopefully counties are also sharing resources like these. Smaller counties just don't have as much resources to do really strong negotiation of contracts, and they're not negotiating from a point of strength anyway because of their size. Some jurisdictions are saving by reducing the number of polling places, and some are saving by reducing the number of pre-printed ballots they need through technology that does ballot on demand. And there is a desire we've seen to save costs by deploying commercial off-the-shelf products as components of voting systems. One jurisdiction said their elections budget for polling place equipment in 2004 was $1.9 million when they had a polling place model. In 2015, it was only $257,000. And they now have vote centers and mail-in, and hence that was one of the biggest points of difference. And the other big point of difference is it was in Colorado, and they're getting a volume discount on the type of system that they're using.
Because it's done statewide? Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And so in another location in an Illinois city, they noted that they were getting ballot marking and printing systems that reduced the number of machines they needed for early voting, but they also were reducing the number of polling places in order to pay for it. And that shouldn't have to happen. So some recommendations and caveats for stability and sustainability as we go forward. If the state can do something to enable the most cost-effective purchasing, that would be really important. What procurement processes could be centrally shared or centralized so that vendors offer the same price to smaller counties as to larger ones, and so that you save costs with efficiencies of not having to reinvent the wheel in every county? And can the state decouple ongoing maintenance from initial purchase contracts? This is something they did in New York State. They enabled competitive bids for the service, the ongoing service agreements, and separated that out from what the vendors were charging for equipment. In order to do that, the state needs to require that vendors share and make available the type of information that they would need in order to do ongoing maintenance. But that's a key way to save some costs over time. Make sure that contracts don't require consumables be bought from sole source. We've seen pricing lists that required paying a vendor $150 for compact flash memory that could be had for $15. We have really good support in the state for what other states have had to pull together task forces or commissions to study costs. We already have activities through Future of California Elections and CACEO where costs are being studied by the counties, by Caitlin's work at California Forward, and through the election funding working group that Kim here has started up with the support of Irvine Foundation. You heard about the innovation in Los Angeles County. There's innovations in places like Travis County, Texas, and in San Francisco, they're considering moving to open source voting system model as well. This can help separate the build or buy from the ongoing support process too, but it will mean that funding is needed for that support structure separately. Commercial off-the-shelf products are great. They can reduce costs because they can cost less individually. You can replace a tablet that might last 2 or 3 years, but not 7 to 10. You're not replacing your whole voting system, but it's important to note these products get obsolete faster than with some of the voting systems. So the bottom line recommendations is, plan for the most money that you need, whether or not you move to SB 450 style, you're still going to need polling place voting systems for Sacramento County if that's what they end up having to do. It may or may not happen in all the counties if it's opt-in, and counties shouldn't be forced into it because of costs. It should be because it's a good idea. Engage with groups doing cost research to better fund ongoing needs and find out how to best support the counties. And I'd say one last thought. There are systems entering the market now that may purport to be secure and effective, but they don't meet the quality standard that we enjoy here in California and that generates justifiable voter confidence. California should ensure through smart funding that it continues to be a national leader on testing, certifying, and deploying voting systems that support evidence-based elections, robust risk-limiting audit capability, better scanning capability than we've ever seen before, remote accessible ballot marking that supports genuine privacy and security, especially if we're moving to more vote by mail. If we're going to improve on voter participation, it's really critical to support voter confidence. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Great presentation. All right. We'll next hear from Caitlin Maple from California Forward.